afternoon. This is Karan Parmar from QLD News. Straight to the breaking news coming from Gold Coast, where two helicopters have collided mid-air near SeaWorld. At least 4 people are died, 3 more are fighting for their lives. It happened on the broad water in front of thousands of tourists, and a warning some might find elements of this story stressing. The moment two helicopters, 30 lives in a tourism industry changed forever. A cameraman on the dashboard of a boat captured the collision and the terrifying moments. Two aircraft fell from the sky. One helicopter flipped and crashed on its roof and was wedged in a sandbank. Inside a pilot, 6 passengers, including at least one child. It had burst into flames after the collision. Outside SeaWorld, this is the second helicopter making an emergency landing. It had no windscreen, no nose, both had blasted off on impact. The pilot guided the broken aircraft away from dozens of boaties, jet ski riders and swimmers. They had already been forced to cover when the blades from the first chopper speed into the sand. Then they raced to help. One person, a child, was pulled from the wreckage. Holidaymakers become rescuers, removing people and bodies from the cabin of the upside-down helicopter. It happened in the broad water on a beautiful day, brimming with thousands of tourists. The crash, the chaos, the courageous efforts to save lives was captured from Southport to the spit and inside SeaWorld, where families waited for loved ones to return from a flight over paradise.
The two helicopters crashed and
they just turned around and just smacked into each other. Both dropped and one lit on fire. One of the helicopters actually lit on fire.
He obviously wasn't looking above him at the time and just going straight jackknifed into the other bloody helicopter, eh?
Going up in flames.
It was a bang.
You
We
could hear
were
it over
looking
the
above
machine,
because we
right?
could see them flying into each other, and then he's like, look, and we looked
Yeah.
up and instantly hit each other. Blades went flying, flames everywhere.
Pretty scary, yeah. It was like, it felt like it was a movie or something. It didn't feel like it was real.
Police, paramedics, doctors, lifeguards, volunteer, marine rescue and rescue helicopters were sent from across the coast to search for survivors.
Can you please make your way back to the location? There's quite a lot of POI in the water. Lifesaver 45 is requested you go back there, so if you start tracking there, please.
inside the Broadwater.
From the Broadwater enclosure.
7 people on board the doomed helicopter, 4 of them are dead, 3 including at least one child are tonight fighting for their lives. 6 others from the second aircraft, which has registered to SeaWorld, were showered in glass. They are in shock after a flight with no joy, only terror and tragedy. We have Divya Juneja at Gold Coast University Hospital. Divya, how many patients have been taken there?
Hi Karan, 2 patients have been brought here, a woman and a child. Another child was airlifted to Queensland Children's Hospital. Another 6, they are currently being assessed at Rubina Hospital in the emergency department. And some of these could be transported here later tonight. They are of course in a critical condition with trauma injuries. Now Karan, at this stage, the ambulance services and police are not releasing the ages of the victims until all next of kin have been notified. We will say emergency services say that this site was incredibly difficult to access, but they will now hand it over to the Australian Transport Safety Bureau to investigate. That organization has offices coming from Canberra as well as Brisbane, many of which have already arrived here this afternoon. They say that they will comb it through the wreckage and map out the site to try and determine what went so horribly wrong. But they do need help. They say there was plenty of people inside SeaWorld and also with the Broadwater who witnessed the accident and also filmed it.
This incident is very heartbreaking for every Australian and Gold Coast citizen, and it will definitely impact the tourism industry of Gold Coast, as people are very afraid of taking these scary rides from now. We hope for the situations to be normal again as soon as possible. And for the next news coming from India, Yatendra Jadhav will host you all. Over to you, Yatendra.
Thanks Karan and good afternoon everyone. Myself Yatendra Jadhav reporting from QLD News. So now I will talk about the news coming from India. Now India is hosting the G20 foreign minister meeting, fractured East-West relations over the conflict in Ukraine and increasing concerns about the China's global aspiration and is set to dominate the meeting. The meeting is particularly crucial for India's hopes to use its chairmanship of the group to leverage its position on the global stage. Also to adopt a neutral stand on Ukraine After welcome dinner yesterday, the main meetings will be held today, and India wishes to focus on issues of importance to developing nations like rising inflation, debt stress, health, climate change, food, and energy security. However, the split over the invasion of Ukraine and its impact on global energy and food security is predicted to overshadow the proceedings. The antagonism has left G20 host India in the position of trying to reconcile clearly differences. The meeting is being attended by 40 delegations, including those headed by the Russian Foreign Minister, the US Secretary of State, and the Chinese Foreign Minister. Russia says it will use this meet to tell the world who, as per Moscow, is responsible for the political and economical crisis. Germany says it will counter Russian propaganda, and the United States has underlined that it is important to call out Moscow. EU says Russia must be made to understand that the war in the Ukraine has to end. Lavrov would attend and be seated with delegation from the UAE and East Asian countries. India has declined to blame Moscow for the war, seeking a diplomatic solution, and has boosted its purchase Russian oil. Remember, India is also abstained from voting in UN resolution that condemned the Ukraine invasion. Yesterday, Lavrov and India's Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar held discussion in New Delhi. This meeting, it's also being watched for how tension between Washington and Beijing will play out. China has been backing a political solution to the war in Ukraine. Last month, the United States shot down when it is said was a Chinese surveillance balloon just off South Carolina after it spent days traveling across the country. The incident weighed in the diplomatic rift between the two countries. The US Secretary of State Anthony Blinken has no plans to meet the Foreign Minister of Russia and China. The British Foreign Secretary James Cleverly will meet the Chinese Foreign Minister on the sidelines. Said he will like to support India and having a successful G20 presidency. One official said more than 100,000 foreign delegates from the G20 are expected to visit India this year. This summit will help in raising awareness about tourism potential at the global level. Indian government estimate that foreign tourist number could reach 15 million in 2024 and contributing more than $30 billion in earnings. We have Aman Sood live from New Delhi. Hey Aman, can you tell us what's happening there?
Well, in almost 1 hour's time, we will see the official opening of the G20 Foreign Ministers meeting here at the Press Party Power, where the foreign ministers will be arriving shortly. And the focus, of course, will be on several things. But it's the shadow of Russia-Ukraine conflict that's dominating the agenda here. We know when it comes to India's role is being seen as bridge maker between West and Russia. But the big question is that will there be a joint statement, or will there be a repetition of what we saw at the finance minister meeting in Bangalore? Now we know that Indian Prime Minister also addresses the foreign minister meeting virtually at around 9 a.m. Indian Senate time. And of course, he will be focusing on India's priorities, parties like the reform of the United Nations, counter-terrorism, global skill mapping, among other issues. But largely today will be a big diplomatic day for Delhi because it's not the final foreign ministers meeting, but also the Italian Prime Minister who will be shortly arriving here in the Indian national capital rights. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, we have seen that Russia has taken a strong position and wishes to tell who, as for Moscow, is responsible for the global crisis. What can we expect in that regard? But there is a visible shield or divide between Russia, backed by China, and the West. Of course, we saw in the last 24 hours comments by Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov here in Delhi, who has been saying that they would like to see the strengthening of the Indian presidency of the grouping. And they have been saying that this is primarily on economic grouping. Well, they are right in several aspects because the group emerged after 2008 financial crisis. But since then, it has taken other rules as well. Because the United Nations was found missing, it has been taking strong action in terms of the COVID crisis. They were special emergency meetings of G20, but essentially, the developed, the Western world and the developing countries have been talking about the impact of the conflict, especially in global South. In fact, the Bangladeshi Foreign Minister, who has been invited as one of the guest countries, spoke to you exclusively and talked about how the conflict is impacting to the price rise in this country. That is a common story. Where is Bangladesh or many African countries? So essentially, this divide needs to be British. And we will get to know about the final outcome later in the day as the negotiation progress.
Thanks, Aman. It's undoubtedly a very proud moment for India and every Indian that India is taking so many steps just to spread peace all over the world. That's all from us. We hope you like the news. Thanks everyone for your time.